I never thought I'd be writing about family drama on Reddit. But here I am, a 34-year-old woman caught in the middle of an unexpected storm. To give you some context, my childhood was far from typical. My parents divorced when I was 11, and it wasn't one of those amicable splits you sometimes hear about. It was messy, filled with arguments and tension that I couldn't escape. After the divorce, I ended up bouncing between two homes with shared custody. It wasn't easy adjusting to this new reality. One week, I'd be at my mom's small apartment, the next at my dad's house that suddenly felt too big and empty. I learned to pack my life into a suitcase, never feeling fully settled anywhere. Despite the challenges, I managed to adapt. I threw myself into my studies and extracurricular activities, finding solace in books and art. It was during this time that I discovered my passion for graphic design, spending hours sketching and playing around with my mom's old computer. When I was 18, just as I was preparing to leave for college, my dad started dating again. He met Linda, my now stepmom, at a local art gallery. I remember him coming home that day, more animated than I'd seen him in years, talking about this amazing woman he'd met who shared his love for impressionist paintings. I was happy for him, truly. The divorce had been hard on him, and it was good to see him excited about something again. But I was also apprehensive. I was about to start a new chapter in my life, and here was my dad, potentially starting one too. Linda seemed nice enough when I met her. She was warm and tried to engage with me, asking about my college plans and my interests. But I was already mentally checking out, focused on the upcoming move to my dorm and the start of my new life. It was during one of these early meetings with Linda that I first encountered Mark, her son. He was 21 at the time, home from college for the summer. Our introduction was brief and awkward. We shook hands, exchanged pleasantries, and that was about it. There was no instant connection, no sense of newfound siblinghood. He was just a stranger, connected to me by circumstance rather than choice. Growing up as an only child, I never really understood sibling dynamics. When Linda and Mark entered our lives, I was already an adult, so we never developed that typical brother-sister bond. Mark was more like a distant relative I'd see at family gatherings than a sibling. After college, I moved into my own place and started my career. I work from home as a graphic designer, which gives me the flexibility I love. My apartment became my sanctuary, a place where I could control my environment and focus on my work without interruptions. I've always been independent and enjoyed my solitude. Kids were never really part of my plan. I'm not comfortable around them and never saw myself as the maternal type. Mark got married about 9 years ago to Sarah. I attended the wedding, but it was more out of obligation than anything else. The ceremony was beautiful, held in a picturesque garden with fairy lights strung between the trees. But as I sat there, watching Mark and Sarah exchange vows, I felt like an outsider looking in on a family that wasn't quite mine. Over the years, they had 2 kids, a boy who's now 6 and a girl who's 4. I've seen them at family gatherings, but I've never been close to them. The kids are loud and energetic, always running around and demanding attention. I usually find myself retreating to a quiet corner during these events, feeling overwhelmed and out of place. Recently, Sarah had to spend a lot of time at her father's house because he was very ill. I didn't know much about the situation, just bits and pieces I'd heard from my dad during our occasional phone calls. Apparently, Sarah's father had been diagnosed with a serious illness and needed round-the-clock care. That's when Mark started showing up at my place with his kids. The first time it happened, I was in the middle of a complex design project when my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Mark standing there with his 2 kids looking harried and stressed. "Hey, sis," he said, using a term of endearment that felt forced and unfamiliar. "I've got a work emergency, and Sarah's at her dad's. Can you watch the kids for a couple of hours?" Before I could even process what was happening, the kids were in my apartment and Mark was heading out the door, calling out a hurried thanks over his shoulder. I stood there, stunned, as the kids looked up at me with wide eyes. I had no idea what to do with them. My apartment wasn't child-proofed, and I didn't have any toys or activities to keep them occupied. I ended up putting on a cartoon on my laptop and trying to get back to work, but it was nearly impossible to concentrate with the constant chatter and movement. When Mark came back 2 hours later, I tried to talk to him about how this wasn't a good arrangement, but he was already ushering the kids out the door, promising to make it up to me sometime. I thought it was a one-time thing, but then it happened again the next day, and the next. Soon it had been a week of Mark dropping off the kids for 2 hours each day. Each time I tried to talk to him about it, but he always seemed to be in a rush, barely giving me time to say hello before he was out the door. My work was suffering. I couldn't focus with the kids around, and I was falling behind on my deadlines. I left messages for Mark, trying to explain that this wasn't a sustainable situation, but he never returned my calls. Then, yesterday, things came to a head. Mark showed up unannounced, kids in tow. Before I could even open my mouth to protest, he was hustling them through my door. He didn't even come inside, just left them there and drove off. I was furious. This wasn't a daycare, and I had never agreed to be a regular babysitter. I tried calling Mark immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I left message after message, each one more frustrated than the last, but got no response. After an hour of trying to work while keeping an eye on two energetic kids who were clearly bored and unhappy, I decided enough was enough. I didn't have Sarah's number, but I managed to find it through some old family emails. I called her, feeling a mix of guilt and relief. When she answered, I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, emphasizing that while I cared about the family, I simply couldn't continue to babysit on such short notice. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said she'd be right over. True to her word, she arrived within half an hour. As she gathered up the kids, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it anger? Disappointment? Understanding? I wasn't sure. As they left, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but it was quickly replaced by a new worry. Had I just caused a major family rift? Was I being selfish? Should I have just sucked it up and dealt with it? I'm writing this post because I'm genuinely unsure if I did the right thing. On one hand, I feel like my boundaries were being repeatedly crossed, and I had every right to put a stop to it. On the other hand, family is supposed to help family, and I worry that I've let everyone down. My phone has been suspiciously quiet since Sarah left with the kids. I'm dreading the inevitable fallout, but I also feel like I need to stand my ground. Am I the asshole here? Should I have handled this differently? Any advice would be appreciated as I navigate this family minefield. Update 1. It's been a month since my last post, and to say a lot has happened would be an understatement. I want to thank everyone for their advice and support. It really helped me navigate the initial fallout. After Sarah took the kids, my phone exploded with calls and messages from my dad, Linda, and Mark. I ignored most of them at first, needing time to process everything. The constant buzzing of my phone was a stark contrast to the silence I'd grown accustomed to in my apartment. Each notification made my stomach churn with anxiety. Eventually, I decided to talk to Linda, thinking she might be the most reasonable. Linda and I had always had a cordial relationship. While we weren't close, she had always been kind to me, often acting as a buffer between my dad's expectations and my desire for independence. I was wrong about her being reasonable. When I finally called her back, Linda was furious. Her usually calm voice was sharp with anger as she accused me of ruining Mark's marriage. I was confused. How could my refusal to babysit cause such? A huge problem? When I pressed for more information, Linda clammed up, saying it wasn't her place to share details. The conversation left me reeling. I felt like I had stepped into some bizarre alternate reality where I was suddenly the villain in a story I didn't fully understand. The guilt and confusion were overwhelming. Frustrated and worried, I started digging. I reached out to some mutual acquaintances and pieced together what had happened. It turns out, Sarah had filed for divorce. The reason? She had discovered that Mark had been cheating on her. I was shocked. Mark, the golden child of the family? A cheater? It seemed unbelievable. In all the family gatherings, Mark and Sarah had seemed like the perfect couple. They always arrived together, matching outfits, hands intertwined. They'd share inside jokes and finish each other's sentences. It was the kind of relationship I had secretly envied, even if I'd never admit it. But as I learned more, the pieces started to fit together. Apparently, Mark hadn't been dropping the kids off at my place so he could work or run errands. He had been using that time to meet up with his affair partner at a local hotel. Sarah, who had been suspicious for a while, had done some extensive digging before filing for divorce. I thought back to all those times Mark had dropped off the kids. Had he been rushing off to meet his mistress then? Had I unknowingly been enabling his infidelity? The thought made me feel sick. My call to Sarah had been the final piece of the puzzle for her. She had assumed Mark was at work when he dropped off the kids, but my call revealed the truth. Sarah had immediately left her father's bedside and rushed over, not just to pick up the kids, but to confront Mark. I felt sick to my stomach. Without realizing it, I had been an unwitting accomplice in Mark's affair. No wonder everyone was upset with me. In their eyes, I had exposed the family's dirty secret. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Why was I being blamed for Mark's infidelity? Why was everyone more concerned about keeping his secret than about the pain he had caused Sarah and the kids? I decided to confront Mark directly. I called him, demanding an explanation. He picked up on the first ring, which was a surprise given how he had been ignoring me before. Mark's voice was a mix of anger and desperation. He accused me of meddling in things that weren't my business. He said I should have just watched the kids without question, that family was supposed to help family, no questions asked. I was furious. I reminded him that he had never actually asked for my help. He had just assumed and taken advantage. I told him that his actions were his own, and he had no right to blame me for the consequences. The conversation quickly devolved into a shouting match. Mark called me selfish and uncaring. I called him a cheater and a coward. We both said things we probably shouldn't have, dredging up old resentments and grievances. By the time I hung up, I was shaking with anger and frustration. I felt like I had been unfairly cast as the villain in a story where I was, at worst, a bit player. The family seemed to be fracturing along clear lines. Linda was firmly on Mark's side. My dad was trying to play peacemaker, and failing, and I was left feeling isolated and angry. As I write this update, I'm still processing everything that's happened. I stand by my decision to set boundaries, but I never imagined it would lead to this. I'm left wondering how I can move forward with my family after all of this. Should I try to make amends or stand my ground? How do I navigate these choppy family waters? Any advice would be greatly appreciated as I try to figure out my next steps. Update 2. It's been another few weeks since my last update, and things have only gotten more complicated. I want to thank everyone again for their support and advice. It's been a lifeline during this difficult time. After the blow-up with Mark, I thought things couldn't get much worse. I was wrong. My stepmom, Linda, has been on a mission to get me to apologize to Mark. She's been calling and texting nonstop, insisting that I need to make things right with my stepbrother. I tried explaining my side of things to her, but she wasn't having it. In her eyes, Mark is the victim here. She keeps saying that marriages go through rough patches and that I shouldn't have interfered. It's like she's completely ignoring the fact that Mark was cheating on his wife and using me as an unwitting cover. Linda's behavior has made me reflect on our relationship over the years. When she first entered my life, I was standoffish, too caught up in my own world to give her a chance. But over time, she had grown on me. She was always there at family gatherings, making sure I had my favorite foods, asking about my work, showing genuine interest in my life. Now, it felt like all of that warmth had evaporated, replaced by a cold, unyielding defense of her son. What's been most surprising and hurtful is my dad's reaction to all of this. I always thought he'd have my back, but he's been siding with Mark and Linda. He called me a few days ago, trying to convince me to apologize. He said that family is more important than being right, and that I should be the bigger person. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was the man who had taught me to stand up for myself, who had encouraged me to pursue my dreams even when they didn't align with his expectations. I remembered how proud he had been when I landed my first big design contract, how he had bragged to all his friends about his daughter, the successful freelancer. I reminded him of all the times he had taught me to stand up for myself, to not let people take advantage of me. I asked him if those lessons suddenly didn't apply when it came to his stepson. The conversation didn't go well. My dad accused me of being stubborn and unforgiving. He said that Mark was going through a tough time and needed family support. When I pointed out that Sarah and the kids were probably going through an even tougher time, he brushed it off, saying that was between Mark and Sarah. I lost it at that point. I told my dad that I was disappointed in him, that I couldn't believe he was choosing to support a cheater over his own daughter. I said some things I'm not proud of, letting out years of pent-up frustration about how our relationship changed after he married Linda. I brought up how he had missed my college graduation because he was on a cruise with Linda and Mark. How he had forgotten my 30th birthday but never missed sending Mark a gift. How he always seemed to have time to attend Mark's kids' school events but couldn't make it to my art shows. The call ended with me telling my dad that I needed some space. I said I wouldn't be in contact for a while, that I needed time to think about whether I wanted to be part of a family that valued keeping up appearances over doing what's right. It's been radio silent since then. No calls, no texts, no emails. Part of me is relieved to have some peace, but another part is hurt and angry that no one has reached out to see how I'm doing. I've been thinking a lot about family and what it means. Is it really family if they only support you when you're doing what they want? Am I wrong for wanting to stand by my principles? I find myself looking at old family photos, trying to pinpoint when things changed. There's one from my high school graduation. My dad's arm around me, both of us beaming at the camera. Another from the day I moved into my first apartment. Dad helping me carry boxes, looking proud and a little sad. Then the photos start to change. More of Mark and his family, fewer of me. Was I the one who pulled away? Or was I pushed? As I write this, I'm still unsure about what the future holds for my relationship with my family. I know I don't want to apologize for something that wasn't my fault, but I also don't want to lose my family completely. The silence in my apartment, once a comfort, now feels oppressive. I catch myself reaching for the phone, wanting to call my dad or even Linda, but I stop myself. I'm not ready to give in. Not ready to pretend everything is okay when it's so clearly not. I'm left wondering how to move forward. Do I reach out and try to mend fences? Do I stand firm and wait for them to come around? Or do I accept that sometimes family isn't defined by blood or marriage, but by the people who truly support and understand you? Any thoughts or advice would be greatly appreciated as I navigate this new, uncertain territory.